talk about Lluest Abercaethon, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with as a ruined farmstead. It's a place that we kind of got to know gradually over a few years. Not initially, just a place we walked past as we went up onto the hills to do our upland surveys. Yes, like I say, Lluest Abercaethon is a place we used to walk past often enough on our way to the hills, but we didn't really linger there much longer, any great length of time, because it wasn't an area we were surveying specifically. But as for those of you who don't know, it's a little farm in the Clettwr Valley, just to the western side there of the Craig Goch lake or reservoir. And it's got a little track up to this, one of the most interesting walks you can have actually in the area, and goes into a very interesting landscape, a very striking landscape. When we did our field surveys, we walked the higher ground. We didn't do the valley floors so very much, not the lower parts. I mean, it was the uplands we surveyed as part of our uplands initiative for field surveys. But this is a shot we took when we were out there of Lluest Abercaethon, probably about 12 years ago now, I guess. You see the track leads to the ruins of the farmhouse as it was. It takes its name, Lluest Abercaethon, from Abercaethon Farm, which from memory is down in the lowlands closer to Rhayader. But the significance of it being a Lluest is it's a shepherding station, and it would have been a place where the sheep in particular, but the stock animals from Abercaethon Farm would have spent the summer up on the summer pastures, and that's where it gets its name from. This is as it looked 12 years ago, strangely. We were reviewing these photographs the last few days, and it was quite a substantial ruin. I think I've seen photographs recently. Then there are photographs that when people lived there, it's not that long ago, it was occupied. This is it this year. Oh, sorry, last year, 2020. So it's reverse view of the previous shot. It's come down, all the standing walls, the chimneys are gone now. So it's slipping into history. But anyway, as we often walked up the track past the ruins to our place of work in the hills, one fine day we noticed something just to the side of the track. Everyone gets distracted by the ruins. You can see, hopefully you can see my cursor, my pointer on the screen here. But what we noticed just to the other side of the track here is this. I hope you can see this earthwork feature, which looks like a large circular feature. And we thought that was quite an oddity and needed more investigation. And to cut a long story short, we had the opportunity through Elan links to suggest that some more attention was paid to that feature. It did have a record as an archaeological site. It had been recorded about 20 odd years ago as a Bronze Age Ring Cairn, potentially. But we will come to that later. A few years ago, we took a guided walk up around the hills there, and we actually had enough bodies with us to get people to stand in the circle. And people did. As you can see, you know, I think that's me actually, but you know, you can see the bank there rising around, curving around. There's a slight ditch inside it, and these people up this side then are on the top bank. So it's a very odd feature, very unusual, and certainly worthy of research. So Elan links with luckily, fortunately, the Heritage Lottery funding was forthcoming, and Elan links got up and running. And this is one of the sites that funding was allocated towards to actually investigate, to see if we can make any sense of what's there, you know, and without, as at this stage, you're thinking of excavating it, you know, archaeologically excavating it. So it was decided to undertake a geophysical survey, which was done, and the gentleman in the photograph is our friend Ian Brooks of Engineering Archaeological Services, Blaenau Ffestiniog, who does a lot of, if we ever need to do geophysical survey, we always commission Ian to come into it, because he's very, he travels light and he's very efficient. And you can see him here actually in the process of undertaking the geophysical survey. Now, there are two ways of surveying. I'm not a geophysical surveyor, right? I can barely spell the word science, let alone explain it. But there are two ways. Resistivity, I can't even say them. Resistivity is one, and then which is what you're seeing there. Sorry, I'm getting confused here. There's magnetometry and resistivity, the two. But basically, the bottom line is that they both give you kind of a radar picture of what's going on underground. Neither of them are perfect. They give us more evidence than we can just gather from looking at surface remains, the surface evidence. Okay. They give us a little insight to what's going on underground, but you should never believe that geophysics gives you everything that you need to know. Very often you will find yourself in a position where you've done geophysics, but you still have to actually break the ground and do some archaeological excavation to find out more. But you can see him here with another view of him on the earthwork again, and you can see again the circle of this earthwork is quite prominent in that shot. It's a fascinating sight. And within in that shot there, you can see the actual size of the bank. It gives you an idea of this lower bank. It's actually quite high, you know. There's possibly a slight ditch outside, but our opinion is that there is more of a ditch on the inside than the outside, which does make it unusual, because I say we've walked over most of the hills in that district, and there's nothing quite the same as it. There are similar features, but we'll come to those later. I'll skip the magnetometry explanation. But the long and the short of it, again, not wishing to stretch this out too long, is he did a grid of, I think I'm right generally saying it was 420 meters squares or largely. I mean, he couldn't finish each of the squares because there was a slope down to the stream, a very steep slope on this edge. But you can see he put a grid across it, and he walked back and forth, back and forth, did the resistivity and the magnetometry surveys. So he had two versions of it. And he did indeed, the results to the naked eye don't look that much. And Ian does a lot of processing work after he's done the survey. But you can, what's interesting about it, in that image, it looks quite square for a start. It is an interesting observation. But there also seems to be something going on inside. This is, if you like, the ground, the radar shot, what's going on underground. This is not a reflection of what's on the surface so much. This is what's underground, okay? And, there are various outputs that Ian will get from his surveys, and here's another view of it. And you can see, again, there's kind of like almost a squareness to it. And certainly down here, this funny little kink here. It's maybe not quite the shape that we think it is on the ground, because very often the earthworks on the ground sort of mask what's really going on underground, and the buried archaeology may not be the same form, the same shape as the surface remains will lead you to think. So again, with Ian's processing, he takes the raw data, if you like, and he then starts interpreting it, and you can see he's picked out for these curving banks. Slight, these are actually the areas, what they call areas of magnetic disturbances. So these are kind of like the responses that he's getting, that show that in the earth, the soil has been disturbed, the ground has been disturbed in the past. But there's very definitely something going on in the centre within the enclosure. And he's put a circle here because he believes that if you look on this side, there is almost like a circular feature there. Now, bearing in mind that it's recorded as a Bronze Age Ring Cairn, which it could be. I mean, in geophysics wouldn't tell if it is or it isn't necessarily. And there's a distinct possibility looking at those images that what you've actually got is an enclosure with a roundhouse inside it, with a hut circle. So you could be looking at a prehistoric settlement. You could be looking at a number of things. We'll again come to those as I go towards the end here, but it's more complicated, evidently, than the surface remains would suggest. Now, there's a very pretty, is very final report. There's very complicated drawing that I'm not going to try to describe to you, but it's basically you've got this what I call a sub-circular enclosure. It's not circular, it's not square, but it's sub-circular. It's a bit off. It's not quite circular, but there's a strong circular feature towards the centre and some other bits and pieces that maybe would warrant further investigation. But you could only now go forward really and think about excavating those features in future. In fact, some evaluation excavation, small scale excavation possibly, just to look to see if we can elucidate some more information than is apparent from that survey. Now, in terms of interpreting that, now hopefully this will jam up right. What have we got in the wider area that compares with this? Now, there's This is actually a Bronze Age Ring Cairn on the Cwmoiro, which is on the Strata Florida side of the hills. The top of the valley of the Moiro, as it goes, the other end, it goes down towards Strata Florida. A very nice earthwork ring, not dissimilar to what we're seeing at Lluest Abercaethon. Difference is there's a big stone sticking up. Because it's a Bronze Age Ring Cairn, there are actually stones sticking around. You can't see them very well in this image, but they are there. It's a stony bank. We don't get that stoniness at Lluest Abercaethon. I personally don't think it's a ring cairn. I think Jenny would probably concur, and I think Ian concurred as well. Doubt that we'd interpret it as a Bronze Age ring cairn. If we look at the history of Lluest Abercaethon, it's got a strange history. It didn't used to be called Lluest Abercaethon. If you go back to the tithe map, the mid-19th century, the house is it's called Clettwr Mawr because it's in the Clettwr Valley. It's not Abercaethon. It's not in the Caethon Valley. That's down near the Wye. But it's in the Clettwr, so the farm was called Clettwr Mawr. But there were other settlements here. Lluest Clettwr was the Lluest. You've got another Clettwr Troedrw Draen. And if you follow the streams up into the hills, you'll find other shepherds' huts in that area. And those Lluest sites tend to have an origin, and very often in medieval times. And you may have all heard of the Hafod tradition, the medieval Hafod tradition of taking animals to the hills for pasture. You find these herdsmen's huts dotted around the sheltered valleys around the whole region. One thing that's related possibly to medieval activity. I just as a late 19th century map again. By this time, it's Lluest Abercaethon and Lluest Clettwr is still there as a farm. This other house has disappeared. It's now a sheepfold. It's been converted. But you see, neither of these maps shows anything in this field. There's no enclosure. There's no building. There's nothing going on in the 19th century that would explain the remains we're seeing. I just want to draw attention. There's a little stream up the top of the map here, Nantaferiad, which gives you that ecclesiastical link. You think of Strata Florida, the monks of Strata Florida, the priest's stream is an interesting name on here, just as we pass. But the hills, they're full of the ruins of herdsmen's houses all over Elenydd, okay? And it's the thing I love most about archaeology is finding these and recording them, I have to tell you. This is near Clettwr actually. But you find groups of single examples. We know from history this was occupied, the house occupied in the 16th century by herdsmen, by cowherds who worked on the Hafod. Strata Florida Abbey owned all of those lands and were responsible for maintaining them and profited from them. So you're looking at those stone foundations are the remains of huts that would have had clay walls, well, timber and clay walls and thatched roofs. So only the stonework remains now. But also dotted with the huts, you'll find these large earthworks. And this one is, there's the source of the Towie. This is the southern end of Elenydd, I suppose you'd say. That's the Towie forest below you. Very nice site there. Not exactly the same as Lluest Abercaethon, but similar. This one is in the northern banks of Llyngunnon. It's more rectilinear, but a similar sort of thing. And there's a hut nearby, the remains of a hut site nearby. And this is a really good one. This one is up above Caerwen on the open common to the south of Caerwen Farm, that is. That's very similar to what we have at Lluest Abercaethon, I would think. And there's a settlement right next to it. I'm sorry, I'll go too far now. So at the end of that, all I can say is that as we stand, I think our mind is that we're looking at some of this. We're looking at a medieval enclosure that's associated with herding of stock on the commons by Strata Florida Abbey. But we can't be certain. It could still be a ring cairn. It could be a prehistoric hut circle in an enclosure. It could be a number of things. But there is no way we could tell more now about this without some excavation. Hopefully in future there will be funding for some sort of excavation. But as it stands, the mystery isn't completely solved. We know there's more to this site than meets the eye, but it's still a bit tantalizing. There's still work to do on it.
I just wanted this very interesting talk, by the way. I just wanted to query the accessibility of these places. Do we have to be with people like you, or could we, if we had the coordinates, could we just go and have a look? Is that possible?
Well, pretty much all of Elenydd, all of the Elan estate is open access land. The thing with Lluest Abercaethon, it is rented to a tenant farmer who has sheep there. So there is a commercial interest, if you like. So it's not. We had to have we had to clear everything, make sure there was permission, and everyone understood each other to go and do the survey. We wouldn't want to upset the tenant or anything like that, obviously. But the track up through there is a public footpath. I'm correct in saying that, no, Jen? And as far as I'm aware, the whole site is open access land. Now, an ordnance survey map would confirm that. I haven't got one to hand. But I don't believe there's any issue with access. And so we've taken guided tours, guided walks through there without any difficulty. So I would say all the sites we've shown you tonight are on open access land. It's just a question of, they have got tenant farmers who sometimes have feelings if you decided to go up and overdo it. But people passing through and looking at sites isn't going to bother anyone. And that's the Lluest Abercaethon is a very well walked route. It's very frequented by a lot. It's very popular with walkers anyway.
Yes.
And I mean, basically, there are just sheep up there most of the time. You don't see many people around at all.